What's going on, guys? I'm Dan Newton and this is Behind the Chalkboard. In today's world, education establishments are run just like businesses, and I've made it my mission to meet the people behind the scenes and dig deep into what it really takes to make a successful education business. If you think you'd be a good guest, drop me an email at dn@charlesgarth.com. Enjoy the episode. How did you start then to get into this world? Like, take us back as far as you'd like to go.
It was a few years ago. I actually initially trained to be a teacher myself. So I taught German with French at secondary level. I was teaching down in Yorkshire, commuting up to Newcastle. My husband lives in Newcastle, born and bred, wouldn't move south of the river, never mind away from Tyne and Weir. And then our eldest son came along a little bit quicker than planned, so I made the move to Newcastle. Came out of teaching because when I was looking to get back in to work, there were no German teaching jobs north of the M62, never mind in commuting distance from Newcastle. Ended up in teacher recruitment, working for one of the leading national supply agencies. Didn't stay there too long. It wasn't my thing. You know, sales calls at 7 o'clock in the morning, speaking to the same people day in, day out, wasn't my bag at all. Then went into commercial recruitment as a recruitment administrator. I ended up staying and working with the same managing director for about 8.5 years. Kind of progressed up, became kind of an operations coordinator, business support, PA. I knew how to fix a toilet and to work the switch on the telephones and for the PCs and things like that. So jack of all trades, master of most, unlike the typical saying. And then December 2019 came and I wanted a change. I wanted something bigger. The MD had downsized. It was just me and him. We were working in a micro business, doing outplacement and talent management and supporting really big companies who were looking at restructuring their senior teams or building teams in new branches or satellite units. Unfortunately, 2020 was a bit of a weird year, so that didn't happen. Ended up being furloughed. I stepped back and I did leave, and I went to work at a care home as an administrator for 12 months. And those 12 months were mega is the only word. It was 100 miles an hour every single day. There was a COVID outbreak at the home where I was. We lost 30 residents in quite a few short weeks. And then I ended up at St. Joseph's in 21. The role was actually advertised as a PA to the head teacher stroke school business manager. It was the first real school business manager in the school. So whilst there was that job description initially, I think the expertise that I brought from all of the different experience that I've had, but then also knowing and understanding from my teaching years, brought something very different to the table. So I don't think I do the job now that I initially applied for 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, something completely different. It's so just tell it, because obviously I was looking at your profile. I was having a look at a bit like what you do. I don't think I've met a PA to the head teacher and then a business manager. So first thing I thought is you're juggling a lot. There's a lot going on. So I guess obviously, that would I be right in saying being a business manager, ultimately you're reporting a lot of stuff back to the head teacher anyway, and stuff that comes in. So just talk to us about like what type of things you'd look after you being a business manager. What does that entail?
I am HR and finance and a bit of estates and everything that doesn't actually involve teaching and learning within the school. And I'm the person that staff would come to if they've, whether it's a member of SLT, so one of the head teachers or assistant head teachers, or one of the classroom staff, come to me if they have queries about payroll, about they need to put in a flexible working request, leave of absences, anything like that. That all comes to me, and then I feed it to where it needs to go. So if it's payroll, I deal with that. I do all of the payroll, do all the checks, make all the changes, and then that gets fed through to our payroll provider. Making sure that everybody's teaching and learning responsibility payments are correct. Just checking tax codes in April because it's a minor thing, but it makes a big difference to a lot of our staff. When we've got increments and pay awards, so teaching staff go up the teaching scale every academic year or every 2 academic years once they're a more experienced teacher, and making sure that those payments go through correctly and that they're incrementing at the right time. Making sure that the pay awards, when they're signed off and they're backdated, making sure that they're correct as well. But I love spreadsheets. So when I know that's happening, I have a really quick spreadsheet that I make, and then I can just visually check it, and I share it with my counterparts at the other schools across the trust as well.
It's the whole business side of it. And you know what? It's the whole reason that we wanted to create this is, this podcast is to find out these things, especially when we hear about education. It's always the front end, the curriculum. And look, that's super, super important. But there's a whole world that goes on behind that, which you've got to try to do. Just talk to me then about things like, I'm guessing, like with so many people, there must be people's welfare, mental health, and all this stuff that you've got to, I guess, try and balance and juggle. Is that a big part of what you do?
It's an element of it for sure. I think most of the health and well-being tends to go through the workload charter. So the trust as a whole has a workload and well-being charter. There's a group of staff who represent different levels within schools and different roles within schools. So at our school, we look at it from 3 verticals. There's teaching staff, teaching support, and then what we're rebranding operations. We want to move, as a school, we're looking to move away from staff being called support staff, because to us that implies that they're not as important as the teachers. They have different responsibilities and they're equally important, because if the catering staff aren't in feeding 1,400 students, it's scientifically proven that nutrition and food and all of that aspect is really important to growing children, but also to us adults as well. We have an excellent kitchen, so a lot of the staff eat from the school dinners as well. And without that, the lessons in the afternoon, you'd have students not concentrating. So actually, that catering team has a direct impact on teaching and learning, and therefore the outcomes, which is what the DFE and Ofsted and ultimately parents and students are looking at. We're in week 2 of exam results coming with GCSEs pending. So those are the outcomes. But then the admin function, so the first voice you hear when you phone up at your school, as a parent, is my admin staff, and they're on reception. One of them starts work at 7:15 because she looks after staff absence and cover, and then they're here until 4 o'clock. And I think sometimes people forget that they're humans as well. And there's only so many people that they can be put through because staff are teaching. They're in the classroom with the students.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially like, in the world of construction where I spend a lot of my time. Mental health challenges are, they're high, and I guess even in an education establishment like that is a lot of kind of responsibility. So yeah, that was obviously the reason that I reached out. We'll spoke about that. Just on growth of the trust, then we seem to be finding a place where the more schools you can get into a trust, that there's more there's more income that can come with a different trust. Your trust then specifically, are you looking to fine tune it to be like the best trust you can be, which is obviously a given, but you're also looking to grow as well? Are you looking to add more schools in on the journey?
Being part of a Catholic trust, that's really driven by another layer above. So that comes from our diocese, the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle. So their strategic plan, which was released in 2018, I believe it was to improve and to make sure that Catholic education across that diocese was the best it could be, and that every student can achieve their God-given potential. So breaking the entire diocese down into 4 trusts, and then setting those boundaries, and then having those trusts then taken in the kind of absorbing the Catholic schools within those areas, is what's happened. I believe there may be more schools to come in, but that wouldn't directly affect me or kind of my school. That's dealt with by a completely different team at Central, as we would call it.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Challenges that you face then. So obviously I know that we talked earlier about how much you've got going on. Where do you find the biggest kind of pain points? You don't have to call anybody out. I don't want to put you in a position where you think I'm going to get in bother, but we all have pain points, whichever job we do. And I just thought, because I don't always get a chance to dig deep into these conversations. It's very surface level conversation, where this I get a chance to say, right, Vicky, when you walk in, where's the challenge?
I think the first and the biggest challenge, and it's the F word, isn't it? It's funding. It's the physical money that's coming in to the schools, and how there's certain pockets of that funding which can only be spent on certain things. So you've got the devolved capital fund, DCF, and that's for assets. So things like whiteboards in classrooms and things like that. With one of our subjects, business studies, becoming more and more popular, due to it kind of straddling different subjects, the need for purposeful rooms for students to be able to have complete access to laptops and computers is really important. That comes out of that very small pot. And I say small in terms of the size of the school, relative to that.
Yeah.
But then, we're now an oversubscribed school, so we get that a bit of extra funding, although it's always lagged, it's always a year in arrears, but we need to make sure we've got the staff in to cater for those additional students. But it then also means we need things like additional chairs and tables for the dining room. Where's that coming from? We've had to create another classroom this year, due to some of the rooming changes that we've had to make. So again, additional furniture, another whiteboard required. And then you've got other pockets like the SCAR funding, which is all to do with the premises and the actual the bricks and mortar of the school. For example, we're having some roofing work done. We needed a new roof put on, and that's come out of that very small pot, considering the size of the roof and the square footage. So it's really hard to juggle the money that does come in, where it's going, making sure we've got the right people in the right places at the right levels, because if we had everybody who was on the upper 3 payment, we'd fast run out of money. But then from that also comes recruitment and retention within the education, and not just of teaching staff, but of teaching support staff and admin staff as well. I don't think some people appreciate just how much goes on outside of the classrooms, that if that didn't happen, the teachers cannot do what they do. And being able to have a good team with good skills, who also has some initiative behind them and can, make decisions to a point, is really important, and will help parents when they're phoning in if there are issues, but then also supporting our pastoral teams who are ultimately looking after behaviour and well-being of our students. And that is something that is becoming more and more prevalent as we see, if we think about post-COVID, our current year 10s who are going into year 11, they've never sat exams. They didn't do their SATs in year 6. They didn't have a transition into secondary school. And you can see it in behaviour, in the way they sometimes lack resilience, in the way they approach problems, and having the support staff behind the teaching staff and the pastoral teams allows them to do what they do really well, and we can support that behind.
Yeah, some really, really good points on that. I think funding's incredible. I think from a construction point of view, back when in the early days when I used to work with schools, we'd kind of look at a roof, and the roof could come out at £250,000, and we're like, right, you need to get your roof done. It's like that outlay of money isn't just about getting the roof done, regardless if it needs doing. It's a knock-on effect of everything else. And, it took a lot of time to understand that. And it's just trying to find that fine balance between keeping your estates healthy, keeping staff, that's, I guess, going back to that question at the beginning, is what's the biggest challenge? It's like, oh my, where am I going to move my money? And does that sit on your shoulders then? Like literally, would you be the overall say on where the money has to move to?
Ultimately, it's up to the head teacher. The head teacher is accountable for everything. As the school business manager, I work very closely with them, supporting them, pulling information together and things like that. Being part of an academy supports that massively as well. We in Bishop Chadwick, we've got a really good central team that's been split into IT, estates, catering, finance, and people. We've got a comms team, a communications and marketing team as well, and they all support the individual schools when there's an issue, or when we're looking at balancing the budgets and making sure that we can have a budget signed off which is suitable for the school. And I say that in the sense that sometimes schools, not necessarily our trust, but definitely across England, and I know in the Northeast there's been articles about schools who have posted a deficit, 5 years running. They need to be able to sign off a budget which is suitable. But if you're signing off constant deficit budgets, you need a plan in place to get you back into a surplus, so you're paying off that deficit as well. So having the central team to support with that if things aren't looking good is brilliant. And being able to bounce off my colleagues at the other schools as well. It's like you mentioned there, £250,000 for a roof, but it's public sector money, and we have to adhere by Nolan's principles. So we need to make sure it's going to the right company and do our background checks on you to make sure that you're a good supplier and ethical and everything. But we also have to make sure that there's value for money. So it's not just a case of finding the best one, it's a case of finding what's the best value. So obtaining quotes and getting that is not always easy either.
No, it's not. It's very tricky. Tendering processes, they're a maze at times, because it's like, yeah, very, very, very tricky to balance. And I totally get it. It's really, really interesting. I think when I was back at school, like, we didn't have business managers. We had an ed teacher, we had a maths teacher, a science teacher, and that was it. And, saying, well, that's the thing. We must have done. No, we absolutely done. So on the just from the side of teaching, then I want to touch on this and salaries for teachers and things like that. We see a lot of adverts flying about, get into teaching. That's still a very, very strong advert that you still see about. Where are we in the world of getting teachers in? Are we still in a place where we need more teachers? Because I think sometimes it confuses me a little bit between a teacher, a teaching assistant, and a volunteer of some sort. And I guess since I've been out of out of education for so long, I think I've just disconnected a little bit from it. But do you just want to talk about, what it means to come in as teacher and the difference between the three and where the challenges are, especially around salaries and things like that?
I think one of the biggest issues is retaining staff. It's retaining teachers once they've trained. If I think on my training, I did a PGCE, so I did a 4-year degree, and then I did a PGCE, and I had to pay for all of that. I think I was lucky that I had the lower university fees to what graduates are having to pay now. On top of that, a postgrad. But now there's different pathways into teaching as well. So our trust, Bishop Chadwick, has a SKIT program. So that's a school-based initial teacher training program, which allows us as a trust to look at shortage subjects to attract people in who want to work close by, who want to have a really good teacher training program, and will help our schools as well, very selfishly. But also that you've got a Teach First program, which is a 2-year program, which graduates can sign up for, and it's purely classroom based. So they're in the classroom from day one as an unqualified teacher. They get lots of support and mentorship from our school. And then in year 2, they've effectively completed their ITT, their initial teacher training, and then they start as an entry-level teacher on MPS 1. And then as they pass through, that's when we start losing them. So, the likes of maths, English, the 3 sciences, physics teachers, they're like unicorns. They don't exist. And because we're competing with commercial jobs as well, if you've spent 3 years doing a physics degree or something really interesting and high level, do you want to go into teaching?
Yeah,
we need you to. But when you can see the many more thousands that you could make as an entry level physicist, as opposed to an entry-level teacher where you have a 2-year induction and you you've got all of this, you hear everything about workload, you hear everything about well-being, you hear everything about behaviour and all of the difficulties. Actually, on the results day is when you hear that you have the good things, but it still has a negative spin on it somehow in the media. And it's really heartbreaking as a former teacher myself, but then also working in this environment. Being able to retain staff is the hardest thing. I think the levels of trainees we're getting isn't enough for the UK, for England and Wales certainly, and they're potentially in the wrong areas geographically. So you know, everybody wants to work in a good school, everybody wants to work in an outstanding school. People don't necessarily want to work in those pockets of deprivation, particularly like we see across the northeast, to bring them out and to promote social mobility.
Yeah, I guess it's the public sector thing, isn't it? You know, where we've got a cap, I guess, and a certain amount of funding. It all comes down to funding, doesn't it? And the only way that we end up paying, you know, doctors and nurses and teachers all more is by taking more tax. It's such a fine balance, you know. I would like to work in government and try and balance it, you know, and it's really testing. It must be really testing, especially when it's finding the right balance, because it feels like there's always going to be something that slips. It feels like you can have amazing curriculum, everything amazing, but then the buildings suffer, or you can have amazing buildings and you don't get great teachers. And you just need to be so on point, I think, as a business manager. Like, you know, it's a skill.
And whether everybody gets it right all the time, probably not. And it's make sure that you're prioritizing the right thing at the right time. So, you know, for us, because of the additional students that we've got coming in, it's making sure they've got a good working environment, that they've got access to, as they move up the school, they do have access to technology and the right machinery for subjects. So, for example, in science, renewing the microscopes because they're cloudy, they're old, actually just changing the lens isn't going to work anymore. For DT, for the changes to the curriculum and the modules in that subject, making sure we've got the right machinery in there, but also ensuring that it's sustainable as well. So if numbers drop in a subject, for example, if it's an optional subject, that we've not plugged a lot of money into one area, whereas now we need to move it back to a different area. So it's balancing. There's lots of juggling, lots of conversations, many spreadsheets, and we'll start looking at September come October this year.
When it all starts again. It's like, where we're going to rinse and repeat every year, doesn't it? Absolutely. So just on to kind of like changes that you would make if you were in charge of the whole education. If you were education minister, you will definitely have a different opinion on a lot of opinions. And don't worry, you're not held to this. But it's always, you know, from the outside in, it's not that we don't see the problems, but we don't feel them. We just kind of think that the education system runs, you know, super smoothly. There's things around curriculum with people saying super dated, you know, we're teaching things that were taught hundreds and hundreds of years ago and we're still teaching it today. So, you know, is there anything you would change about the way the education system's ran for a positive effect?
Yeah, I think the big change for me would be around Ofsted and quality assurance. Having been Ofsteded as a teacher and then being Ofsteded as a school business manager, the stress levels that brings with it. And I know there's been changes due to kind of events at the back end of last year and everything. But the way that Ofsted comes in, does its thing, and then disappears, it's not supportive. if you think about some of the other industry ombudsmen, they're not that way. They're supportive. They offer support and guidance and advice. Frameworks are put in place, and yes, there is a framework that we have to adhere to from Ofsted, but it's very regulatory. It's very rigid. There's no room for flexibility based on the context. So we're measured to the same standards as Eton, for example.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a Hebburn, low deprivation. South Tyneside as a county, as a local authority, has some of the lowest reading ages in adults. How can we match, a school in a very different economical area?
Yeah, that do you know what? That's a really, really good point, isn't it? That everyone's graded the same, but actually, like you say, you can move up and down the country and things can change massively. So there should definitely be a change. Interesting. I never even thought of that, but interesting. And just going on to the final part, what advice would you give to people that are looking to get into business manager's role or any education role that you wish that you'd known earlier on, or something you could pass on to those that are looking to step into the role?
Definitely do it. And I know some people will say, don't ever come into the education sector. It's a nightmare. There's so much red tape, but then there's tick boxes that you have to tick and everything. But if you love, certainly as a school business manager, if you love a role where you have a plan and you get into school and that plan has gone out the window by the second person that's come into your office, but you thrive on that, not knowing what's going to happen, being able to spin lots of plates, and then another couple that happen through the day, with a sense of humour and a smile. And I tend to smile most of the time, like the duck, where it's all serene on the top of the water, but underneath it's frantically paddling and trying to see what's next, what's next. Oh no. Being able to respond to the unprecedented. RAC last year, my last Friday, I was off school. I wasn't meant to be in, and we had a request to support one of our other trust schools. That Friday went out of the window. It meant I didn't have to go to the Metro Centre, so I was very happy about that. Is making sure the safeguarding was sorted. Where are they going to go? How are we going to support staff? And all of this additional stuff that needed to be done, ready for the Monday when school was back and our staff were coming in for the inset day for teacher training, and so that other primary school knew roughly what was going to be happening, so that they could work with the central teams to sort the logistics, so the likes of our estates manager and our comms manager as well, to make sure the right message was being sent out to parents about this is how it's going to work, this is where your students, so your children will be studying, this is how we're safeguarding them, and this is everything else that we're putting in place. Portaloos. We needed to get portaloos in because the students were so tiny, they couldn't use our toilets. Like little things like that, which was actually logistically quite large. So if you can run with things, it's brilliant.
With a smile on your face as well.
Smile.
Absolutely. Always a loud smile. Look, Vicky, it's been amazing for you to come on and just give some insights into the world of a business manager. It really is. So I really do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation as well. It's important to talk about the other side of education as well. So we're looking forward to hearing what your other guests have had to say over the next ones as well.
No, 100%. I'm glad that we can give a platform for this. So yeah, you'll have to listen in. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you'd love to be a guest on here, please drop me an email at dn@charlesgarth.com. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.